Hello students, welcome to today's class. Today we're going to start talking more about tactics, and the first tactic we're going to focus on is going to be mate in one. So we're going to go over the typical mate in one patterns, and the reason why we do this is because if we do enough exercises, your brain is going to get used to these patterns, and whenever you play in a chess game and there's a checkmate in one move that you could do, your brain will be able to quickly detect it and then you execute the checkmate. So we're going to do it the right way. We're going to start with easy exercises and then we're going to increase the difficulty level. Also, I'm going to show you this first exercise is actually from a game that I played, and that way you see how this is going to help you when you play your own game. So after we do these exercises, I want you to be honest with yourself, and if you see that you missed any of these exercises, if you did not get them all, that means you need to continue to practice. This is something that you have to be able to look at a chess position, and if there is checkmate in one move, you should be able to detect it fairly quickly. So I'm going to show you where you can find more exercises like this at the end. So if you want to practice more, you could do so. So let's get started. This position is actually from a game that I played against a national master from Brazil. I was playing this game. As you can see, I had 29 seconds left, and I knew that his king was in trouble. Look, his king is in the middle of the board, and I have the queen and the rook close by as well as my king. So it's my turn, and I had so many different checks, but I had to pick the right one. There's one check that is actually checkmate, and that's something that I want you to do in these exercises. If you cannot find a checkmate, just forget about checkmate, look for checks, and one of those checks has to be checkmate. So that's a good way to do it at this point. After your brain gets used to the different patterns, then you won't even have to think about it. It's just automatic. So anyways, here I have checks with the queen and checks with the rook. So the rook could go here or here. The queen could go here, 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 e4, c4, h6, e3. So it is really hard. If you imagine, I have 29 seconds left. If I had to go one by one, then I'll probably run out of time before I get to do that. So since I have trained enough, I quickly saw the move that would deliver checkmate. And in this case, the answer would be rook to e8. So rook e8, the king is in check, and now the king cannot go anywhere. If you do CPR, C is capture, no one can capture the attacking piece. P is protect, no one can get in the way to protect the king, and R is running away. This king cannot run to any of the squares that he is allowed to move, because here we have the queen, here we have the rook, and then the king doesn't allow the king to go to any of these squares. Checkmate. Okay, so here we go. As promised, we're going to start easy, and then we're going to make them more difficult. We're going to bring more pieces on the board, but all I need you to do is pause the video, try to find it yourself, and every time I set up a different position, pause the video, try to do it, and right after I will share the answer. So pause the video and try to find checkmate in one move for the white pieces. Well, here I have the queen. Where can I put the queen to deliver checkmate? Well, that's going to be right here. The queen is attacking the king. The white king is protecting the queen. So remember, the two kings cannot be next to each other. That's checkmate. If you did something different like queen here, it's not checkmate because the king is going to capture you. There's no protection on the queen. So once again, checkmate in one move. All right, next one. White to move, checkmate in one move. All right, if you found rook f8, then that's the answer. Rook f8, check, and the king cannot go anywhere because of the king and the rook. Now, notice that I am trying to do the move in my head first. I don't move the piece until I really see it, because that's how you should train these exercises. All right, white to move, checkmate in one move. And here the answer is pawn to d7 and checkmate. All right, so this one is a very typical pattern, because next class I'm going to show you how to do the two rook checkmate, and you're going to see this pattern a lot. So we have, well, pause the video, see if you can find it. All right, so we have one rook caught in the king, so that means the king cannot go this way, and then the other rook is going to go all the way to h8 to put him in checkmate. So here, check, and the other rook doesn't let the king escape. All right, next one. So white to move, checkmate in one move. Well, the king is on the dark square. That means this dark square bishop will be the one delivering the checkmate. So we go bishop to d4, check. This pawn doesn't let the king go to g8, and the king is protecting the pawn. Checkmate. All right, white to move, checkmate in one move. All right, this time the king is on the light square, so the bishop cannot get to him, but we have another piece, and in this case is the knight. So the knight is going to go to a square to put him in checkmate. That's going to be knight e7. So knight e7, and these two do not allow the king to escape to any of the other squares. So checkmate. Okay guys, so this is another important pattern, and this one we call it a battery. When you have two pieces like this lined up so that the one in front is going to be protected by the one behind, that's going to be a battery. So we basically have a helper. So white to move, checkmate in one move. Well, here we have to see where can we put the queen so that she attacks the king and she's still protected by the bishop. And typically when the queen gets right in front of the king, that's a very powerful move because the queen not only attacks the king, but the queen attacks all of the squares surrounding the king. So that would be checkmate. And notice that the king cannot capture the queen because of the helper back here. All right, so that's the checkmate. If we had done something like c8, notice that the bishop is also helping, but this time the queen doesn't control e7. So that's why whenever you have this opportunity to go in front of the king where no one can take you and you have a defender, that's a very powerful pattern. Now here we have a few more pieces, but it's the same pattern. So white to move, checkmate in one move. Here we don't have a bishop to help the queen, but we have a pawn, and these kind of pawns we call them pivot pawns. So the pawn is protecting key squares, and the queen could use that help to deliver checkmate. So the answer is queen to g7, and that's checkmate. Again, if we send the queen too far, that is also attacking the king. The queen is controlling all of these squares, but there's no protection on the queen, so the king could capture. That's why, again, we have to use the helper, checkmate. Okay, so which of the white pieces are close to the black king? So white to move, checkmate in one move. And well, the answer to that is the queen and the knight. So this time, the helper is not going to be the bishop, it's not going to be the pawn, it's going to be the knight. The knight is controlling these two squares. So let's see if the queen could go to any of those two to deliver checkmate. Well, going to f7 is not safe. The rook could take and the queen could take. But if we capture on h7, that's it, that's checkmate. Only the king could capture the queen, but we have the helper. So that's the answer, checkmate. Okay, so next one. This one is not that common, but we call this one the smothered mate. So where can the white pieces move to deliver checkmate? Well, there's only one move here that delivers check, and that's going to be the knight moving to f7. This is a cool one because the knight is attacking the king, and the king cannot go anywhere because of his own pieces. So checkmate. Next one, white to move. This is another cool pattern, which is the back rank mate. And basically, the back rank mate has to do with the back rank. When the rooks or the queens are not protecting that rank, your opponent could take advantage of it and put the king in checkmate, especially when you see this pawn formation that doesn't allow the king to escape. So the white pieces to move, checkmate in one move, well, that's bringing the rook all the way down to the back rank, and that's checkmate. All right, guys, white to move and checkmate in one move. Well, notice that here there's no one protecting the back rank, but the king has a escape, and that's why sometimes you see people moving this pawn in front of the king, because if they ever get checked, the king could escape. But in this case, we have the bishop guarding that square, so the king has nowhere to go if we ever put him in check from the back rank. So the question is, can any of our pieces put the king in check right now? Well, there's only one, which is the queen, and the queen is going to travel diagonally to get to the back rank. So that's going to be check, and the king cannot go anywhere. All right, white to move, checkmate in one move. Well, here we have a pattern that we talked about before, which is the battery. We have two rooks lined up. The two rooks are doing a battery. So we could send one of them to h8, and then the rook behind is going to be protecting that rook. So rook h8, check, and the king cannot go anywhere. The king cannot capture because of the other rook. Okay, next one. Notice that we have more pieces here. If you ever get confused, just keep it simple. Look at the checks. One of those checks has to be checkmate. Like right now, which of the white pieces could put the black king in check? Well, the knight is close by, but he cannot put him in check. So this knight is just going to be a helper. Do we have any powerful piece close by? Well, not close by, but we have the queen that could attack from far away. And we have the same pattern that we looked at before. And it's a queen going to a square where the knight could help or protect her. So queen a7 is going to be the checkmate. And sometimes, guys, these checkmates, you're going to fabricate them. So maybe this queen wasn't here before, and let's say it was over here. So they saw the knight being able to help, and they moved the queen up. Maybe at that point is when they push the pawn to attack the knight. So the white pieces finish the checkmate. All right, this one could be a little bit tricky, but again, look at the checks. One of them has to be the checkmate. So how many checks do you see in this position? Well, I see 3 checks. So hopefully you paused the video and you found the checkmate. If you couldn't find the checkmate, at least you found the 3 checks. So let's see, we have 1 check with the queen. Queen could take the pawn, but the rook could take or the king could take. We could take this pawn and that's check, but the bishop could take or the king could take. And then we have knight takes the bishop. So we're attacking the king. The king cannot go anywhere, but it looks like this pawn could take. However, if you look closer, you're going to realize that the rook is not letting the pawn capture because then the king will be in check. So the right move is knight takes bishop, checkmate. This pawn cannot capture because we have the rook right behind it. So that's checkmate. All right, next one, white to move, checkmate in 1 move. Well, here is the same thing, smothered mate. This time the knight could simply go to f7 and that's checkmate. Now, in this same position, I'm going to flip the board and I want you to look at it from black's perspective. Let's say it's black to move. Can you find checkmate in 1 move? Well, we have one of the patterns that we discussed already. We have a pivot pawn that is going to help the queen deliver the checkmate. Queen in front of the king, very powerful pattern. We control everything and we have a helper. All right, next one, white pieces to move, checkmate in 1 move. Well, here this could be a little bit deceiving because we have one of the patterns, which is a battery, and the queen could go to e7 or to f8 to deliver check, but it's not going to be checkmate. Queen e7, the knight could capture or the queen could capture. If we go to f8, then this knight is going to capture. So we have another check, which is a little bit harder to see, but here we have the king is on the light square, and we have the light square bishop ready to go to g6. So bishop g6, check, the king cannot go to f7 because of the bishop, and then even though the queen is not delivering the checkmate, the queen is preventing the king from going to these 2 squares. All right, so this one is a very cool one because you're gonna see that the black king is in the middle of the square. This is the worst position for your king. Your king is supposed to be castled, it's supposed to be where your pieces are. So what can we do here with the white pieces to deliver checkmate? Well, the answer is knight to c3. From there, we're attacking the king. This knight is also preventing the king from going to this square. The other knight is controlling the other 2 squares. The bishop is not letting him go to any of these 2, and even this pawn is helping by controlling this square. So the king cannot go to any of the square surrounding him, and this one is taken by the black pawn. So checkmate. Okay guys, we have this one and 3 more. So here we have white pieces to move, and they deliver checkmate in 1 move. I see 2 different checks. One of them has to be the checkmate. The first one that came to mind was bishop takes pawn, check, but it's not safe. The rook could take, the queen could take, even the king could take. And then the other check has to do with my rook being on the same file as the black king. So this is what we call a discovered check. I moved the king and I discovered the rook to do the check. Alright guys, in this case it is the black pieces to move and they put this king in checkmate. So take your time. This one is a little bit harder to see, but Always keep it simple. Look at the checks. One of them will be the checkmate. So if you looked at a move like Queen E2, I know you have a helper, but they could easily capture you with the queen or with the knight. If you looked at a move like knight takes E2, that's a very good move because you are attacking the king, but they could take you with the queen. I mean, you're going to end up getting their queen for the price of the knight, but it's not checkmate. Checkmate would be knight to f3. So we're doing check. This is like the Smothered Mate pattern. And the bishop cannot capture because the queen is right here to put the king in check. They cannot put themselves into check. So this is checkmate. All right, so this is the last position. And in this one, we're going to look at it from black's perspective first. Let's say it's the black pieces to move. How can we put this king in checkmate? Queen taking the pawn. We have a helper. And this is the same pattern of the queen being right in front of the king. So that's checkmate. Now, if we go back and we look at it from white's perspective, here we go. How can we put this king in checkmate? So take your time and let's see, hopefully you found it. But here it has to do, of course, with another pattern that we mentioned before, which is the rook being on the same file as the king, so we do a discovered check. So we move the bishop and that's check. But the question is, where do we put it? Because if we do a move like this, just to move him out of the way, that's check, but the king could go here. And also the queen could get in the way and block. So it's not going to be checkmate in one move. So where can we put the bishop so that the king cannot go here and so that the queen cannot move to b5? Well, there's only one move that can do that, and that's going to be bishop d5. Now we're doing check with the rook. The king cannot hide over here because of the bishop, and the queen cannot jump over to block. So this is checkmate. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this class, and this is pretty much how we're going to be training tactics in this level. We're going to be going through the different patterns, and we're just going to do a lot of exercises about that specific tactic until your brain gets the hang of it. Once you do that, trust me, your brain is just going to detect it in your games, and it's going to help you with your immediate vision of the board. So with that being said, I'll see you next class.